The American Association honored one of the true titans of baseball at the All-Star Game in Chicago recently. Modern baseball, as we know it today, wouldn't exist without Miles Wolff.
Miles Wolff was, and in my estimation, is independent baseball.
As far as I'm concerned, Miles is the father of independent baseball. He's created several leagues, and these leagues, they were like his children, whether it was the Northern League, the American Association, the Can-Am League. So when you say independent baseball, you may as well just say Miles Wolff.
The former publisher of Baseball America, the industry's preeminent publication, Wolff started the Independent Northern League back in 1993, seeing great potential in an area that had been previously overlooked.
Miles was there from the very beginning. It was Miles' idea, but it was Miles who really looked at the country and said, oh, hey, look at the upper Midwest could really use this thing called independent baseball. Simply stated, we didn't have affiliations. We had not any need to kowtow to the commissioner's office. Independent meant totally independent.
Miles would later found the American Association in 2005. From humble beginnings to the thriving league we see today, played in cathedrals, on pristine fields, it's all thanks to the vision of Miles Wolff.
Miles has been more responsible for the changes in baseball the last 50 years than anyone else walking on the planet. He wanted to experiment. He wanted to try things in this league.
Without Miles, thousands of people would be unemployed. Joy would be gone from a lot of cities, the joy that baseball brings. And the one thing that Miles built that remains today is the ability to be romantic about baseball. I truthfully believe the American Association is still the league that you can be romantic about as it relates to baseball, and it's all due to Miles.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
All right, let's get this thing on the road, shall we? My name is Tim Hanlon. How are you, everybody? It's Good Seats Still Available. Yeah, the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. We welcome you back to the proceedings. And yes, we apologize for the relatively long absence. Let's put it this way. December of last year was quite the month. And on a personal level in particular, and lots of distractions and family situations and all that kind of stuff. But we have turned the page, like hopefully all of you have, into a bright and hopefully sunnier 2023. And we appreciate you sticking with us. And we are back with a whole raft of good stuff for you coming up, at least in the first few months we've got planned already. And what better way to celebrate what used to be in professional sports than in the wilds of winter, kind of hearkening to what awaits us literally just around the corner, and that's baseball. We all love baseball, especially as the harbinger of spring and what usually comes after spring, that being summer and the great American pastime. And a conversation that we had a couple of months back that we're finally able to bring to you, and happily so, with the aforementioned, per the clip that you just heard, Miles Wolff, who is, by all accounts, considered to be the father, the grandfather, the godfather, the whatever, the progenitor, the originator of this thing we know as independent baseball. And in the minor leagues, that's a thing. We all know what's been going on with Major League Baseball and the, I guess you could say, sort of the amalgamation of the minor leagues and bringing them all into a harmonious, supposedly, big tent with Major League Baseball at the top and calling all the shots, the winnowing of teams and the hollowing out, perhaps, of some of the histories of some of these teams. A lot of teams going into new leagues that didn't even exist before and renaming and all that kind of stuff. But independent baseball, sort of that itch, I guess, to sort of harken back to when baseball was a little bit more, shall we say, fun Sure. Certainly more intriguing, a little bit more rule bending, and frankly, a little bit more, I guess, closer to the hue of what taking the family out to the good old ball game was all about. And minor league baseball in particular is probably the best place to purely enjoy that with some reasonable amount of affordability. And the independent leagues, and we're talking about stuff like the Northern League from 1993 to 2010. Miles Wolff was the founder of that thing. If you remember that, and perhaps some of the things that came thereafter, such as the Can-Am League, the Canadian American League, the American Association of Professional Baseball, which still exists today. And all of those things were the brainchild, either directly or indirectly, by our guest this week, Miles Wolff. This is an interesting guy. And one that deserves a whole lot of celebration. If you're a baseball fan and don't know the name Miles Wolff, well, kick back, relax, pop open a brewski or another sort of beverage of your choice and enjoy this conversation. Baseball America, the publication that essentially is the Bible of the sport of baseball, especially in and around the minor leagues. Miles Wolff founded that thing way back when in the early 1980s. I believe he took it over. We'll talk about sort of the origin story of that. But if you remember teams like the Savannah Bees, the Pulaski Braves, we talk about companies. I was going to say teams like the Thunder Bay Whiskey Jacks. Just fascinating stories and various tales of what it means to be an independent baseball team, league, a player. Why independent baseball matters and is important. The rules changes, some of which we'll start to see in this coming Major League Baseball season, where some of the original ideas for things like pitch clocks and having a sort of a tiebreaker process for extra innings with a man on second base and all these kinds of things, all these innovations, those largely came not because minor leagues that were associated with Major League Baseball thought it'd be a fun idea. No, these ideas came from the independent leagues. And you heard some of the names who've been part of those things and obviously lauding all of the efforts that Miles Wolff has put into the game. Mike Veck, longtime owner and son of the legendary Bill Veck at the St. Paul Saints, which still exists today. Sam Katz, you heard there. The CEO, general manager of the Winnipeg Goldeyes, which was formed as part of the American Association and still exists today. Joshua Schaub, you heard, who is the commissioner of the current American Association of Professional Baseball. And the voice that you heard in the beginning, Alex Bastiovansky, who narrated and narrates that clip that we found from the American Association on the event of Miles Wolff being the first and so far only inductee into the American Association of Professional Baseball Hall of Fame. And of course, why wouldn't he? He's the guy who helped found the darn thing, for goodness sakes. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. But this is a story that not only talks about the various teams and the various leagues that he helped found, but also things a little perhaps on the side that you might not sort of recognize. For example, the Durham Bulls. If you watch Bull Durham and know that movie and the story behind that, there would be no movie, and there would be no Susan Sarandon baying her love for the game, and Kevin Costner and talking about candlesticks as a nice wedding gift. It wouldn't be that story. That wouldn't be that movie without the Durham Bulls, and in particular the renaissance of the Bulls when Miles Wolff owned the team. We get into that conversation. We get into some very interesting diversions into minor league hockey. If you remember the Raleigh Ice Caps of the ECHL from 1991 to 1998, they were the team that basically brought and kept professional hockey alive in Raleigh before the Carolina Hurricanes and the NHL discovered that perhaps a better place for hockey than apparently Hartford, Connecticut and the Hartford Whalers. Don't get me started. We have a lot of episodes on that story altogether. But Miles Wolff is a fascinating character, and you're going to get to meet him in our conversation coming up in just a few moments. Now we're going to be talking about minor league baseball and independent baseball, but a little bit of hockey, and just the origin stories of why even the interest in these earlier stage minor league teams and why what makes him and them tick. So a fascinating conversation coming up, and two great books that I highly recommend for you. They are not yet available, but you can pre-order them now wherever good books are found. In particular, Amazon. You can go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode number 288 with Miles Wolff, and you'll find a convenient link to get those pre-orders ready to go so that you'll get them the moment that they are released. The first is Miles Wolff's, I guess you could call it an autobiography. It's called There's a Bulldozer on Home Plate, a 50-year journey in minor league baseball. It's a hoot. It's everything that the title implies and more. And if you're a fanatic about minor league baseball and the story that you're about to hear, do yourself a favor and pre-order that on Amazon. I think it comes out in late February of this new year. And then the one that I've been waiting for, which is the final fourth edition and perhaps the most comprehensive version of something called the Encyclopedia of Minor League Baseball, the complete record of teams, leagues, and seasons. Get this, from 1876 through 2019. Miles Wolff and his pal Lloyd Johnson, have been putting out this compendium for a number of years. This will be the fourth and, according to Miles, final edition of the Encyclopedia of Minor League Baseball. And if you are a completist in all things baseball, and in particular the minor leagues, and of course the independent versions of such, this is the book to get, the Encyclopedia of Minor League Baseball. That comes out, I think, in mid-March, but again, is also available for pre-order at Amazon.com. And again, if you go through our web link at our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, episode number 288, we'll get a little shekel or two of referral love for doing so. So run, don't walk, and click on to make sure that you get those both of those books the moment they arrive. All right, we're going to dispense with our sponsor this week because we want to get right into this conversation. It's a fun one. Sit back, enjoy this. Let's talk about some baseball and the independent versions and such. This is a very fun conversation with the one, the only, the godfather, the father, the grandfather, the progenitor, if you will, of minor league and independent baseball. Here's our conversation we had with Miles Wolff a couple of months back. Please, as always, enjoy. Now, minor league baseball has been around for time immemorial, almost as early as baseball itself. And Lord knows we've got a lot to talk about and ground to cover with your background in it. But for people who don't know, and there are probably a few of them out there, who Miles Wolff is, maybe a little bit of background as to almost like what's my line? Tell us about your involvement in this minor league baseball thing, because it's prodigious, and you've been at the game, so to speak, behind the scenes managerially for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, it's growing up, it's what I wanted to do. After I got cut from Little League for the third straight year, I figured I probably wasn't going to make the big leagues as a player. So I was growing up in a minor league town, Greensburg, North Carolina, and would go to their games and see how they were running it and thinking, well, I could do that better. And, after college and everything else, I ended up running minor league teams.
Well, okay, so that was a dream from boyhood. That's great, and you go through college and stuff. But I'm guessing as you went to college and started to ideate what you possibly might think about doing as a career or as a living, that baseball wasn't really kind of top of mind from a practical perspective.
No, specifically, there were no sports administration courses there in the United States when I went to college in the 60s. So there was no path to get, into minor league baseball or any sort of baseball. But, one reason I went to college at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, one reason I went there is the Orioles were there, and every spring I'd go down to their farm department and say, hey, have you got any jobs? And they weren't about to hire me, but they were very polite and, helped me and just said, here's some names of people but you should know. It was just, and then the Vietnam War was on, and, I thought, well, let me go a year to graduate school because President Johnson had told me the light was at the end of the tunnel and the war was going to be over shortly. And I thought, well, I'll go to graduate school and, then I won't have to worry about the draft. But the war went on for another 6 or 7 years. So after graduate school, I got my master's in history, which didn't have much help. I went in the Navy and went to officer candidate school and came out, an ensign. But one of the things, my eyes, I wore glasses, and if you want to drive a ship, you need good eyesight. So they put me in the supply corps, which teaches you the business aspects of running a ship. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing as running a minor league club. So I got lucky in that, I spent 3 years in the Navy doing business and budgets and all of those things, and got a business background. So when I got out, I could, have some background.
So when you're out, though, what do you start looking for? Do you literally, say, okay, I'm gonna go find something in baseball finally, or were those business, skills that you were learning in the Navy, kind of pointing you to, I don't know, something more, I guess, practical or real, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, I know all, when I went to the OCS, all the guys that had gone to Wharton School of Business or these good business schools wanted to be in the supply corps. And here I'm a history major. I don't know what the supply corps is, but they didn't get in and I did because they were looking at it would lead them to good things. But no, it just, again, you got to be in the right place sometimes. And then when I got out of the Navy, I just started knocking on doors and got a call from the Atlanta Braves. Can you come down for an interview? And I was in baseball.
And what did that mean? What was being in baseball what did you think you might be getting into? And what was, if you will, offered to you? Because you're alluding to the fact that, I think it's lost on people today, right? That there's no straight line path here, right? This you're clearly going off the board for 50 in the game of Jeopardy here.
Yeah. No, I mean, I flew down to Atlanta and interviewed Eddie Robinson, the former big leaguer, and he was farm director. And interestingly enough, he had been my mother's favorite player when he played for the minor league Baltimore Orioles, but that's not part of this story. But they needed a Double-A general manager in their Savannah club. They had a new team moving to Savannah, Georgia. And, they had been hiring a lot of old minor league GMs with a lot of experience and hadn't been very happy with what they were getting. And prior to hiring me a year or two earlier, they'd hired some young guys, in their mid-20s to go to some of their other teams and been very happy. So they were looking for somebody new, young, fresh, that not, there had been 448 minor league teams in the late 40s. And by 1971, I think they were down to 106. So there were a lot of guys that were hanging on that weren't really good, and they were looking for fresh blood. And here I was, and they put me as the head of their Double-A club.
And the way minor league baseball was structured, I guess still kind of today, but certainly then, was that the parent team, in this case the Atlanta Braves, they controlled all the players and all that kind of stuff, but the other parts of the franchise, that was your responsibility, right? That's the business.
Sure, but the good thing is most minor league clubs were locally owned by community groups. And they actually owned their minor league teams outright because they didn't want to have to deal with local owners. So I was working directly for them. And as I say, it was, I was in charge of all the business aspects, from getting the lease to, running the concessions to hiring the grounds crew to doing everything that a minor league guy has to do. I loved it.
Loved it enough to really stand out, right? You're kind of burying the lead there, right? You're a son of a former newspaper man, right? You won an award from the Sporting News for being one of the top minor league managers or general managers in the country that year.
Yeah, no, my first year I was the AA GM of the year. And I don't want to downplay. I mean, it was a huge honor, and I loved it. But we basically had two good crowds of 10,000 that sort of made the year. And again, minor league baseball, early 70s. Almost no team averaged 1,000 people a game at the AA level. So. It was a different era, and I had some ideas, and we worked hard at it, and as I say, it all it came together. We ended in last place or next to last place, and it wasn't a great team or anything like that. We had 13 rainouts because we didn't have a tarp, but. Yeah, the Sporting News, gave me that award.
All right, so I'm guessing you were hooked, but you kind of weren't, right? Because you left after a couple of years after that, and it sounds to me, based on what I've read about your background, a little bit from the book too, is that you kind of pulled in like two directions. You sort of have this gnawing, and now actually. Executed, if you will, love for the game and maybe the business aspects of it, yet sort of being pulled by this sort of, I guess, belief that, having gone to a stellar institution, a graduate degree under your belt, that you should be, quote unquote, doing something more with your life, young man. And I guess I'd love to get a little inside the id there and sort of get a sense of how are you managing those two seemingly polarly different thought processes as you thought through and maybe felt your way through what was, frankly, the beginnings of really a baseball career.
Well, you're right. I mean, when I went into baseball, I just wanted to prove that I could do it. I wasn't looking at it as a career. It was, let me go show you there are good ways to run a ball club. Because I said I'd grown up in Greensboro and seeing GMs chasing little kids for baseballs, and knowing, hey, that's not good PR, that it could be done. But after 3 years, I, here with my Hopkins degree and, I had my master's thesis was published by Stein and Day, and it got some commercial success. So I have these things under my belt. Well, let me go get a real job. And so I quit the Braves and, decided it's time to get a real job. And for the next 6 or 7 years, I never found one.
Well, but you did things in and around, though, that kept you fresh around it, right? Like
Sure.
You did some broadcasting. You wrote a novel, which had something to do, I think, with, well, certainly North Carolina, and I'm sure a little bit of baseball sort of crept its way in there, and et cetera, right? I mean, baseball was still part of your fabric, if you will, if not outright paying the bills.
I was, at one point going to write the great American novel. So would live at Savannah Beach, but about every spring my money would run out. So there was always somebody that needed a GM. One year in Anderson, South Carolina, they fired their guy in mid-season. I went up. The Braves, the GM at Richmond wasn't comfortable. He needed some help, and he said, "Will you be the play-by-play, but come up and help?" Where else? I went to Jacksonville because the GM at Jacksonville had gone with the World Football League. So,
ding, ding, ding. That's an important little divot for us. Yes, the Jacksonville
Express, I think.
Express. You're right. Exactly right.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good on your part. So it was bouncing around pretty good. I built up some credits with my years in Savannah. But, would, work through the summer, and at the end of the year, say thanks, I'm going back to Savannah Beach, because there was some good things about living at the beach. And then the next spring, something else would come up my way, and I'd take that and, get enough money to get through the winter. But yeah, I did play-by-play one year at Richmond, ran Jacksonville, ran Anderson. There was an independent league starting in Texas, the Gulf Coast. I drove out there to try to hook with them, but it went out of business before I got to Texas, so I had to turn around. But as I say, never found anything, and my novel got published and did okay, but not anything significant. And it's finally in 1979 I said, well, I better get serious. And the only thing I know I really like to do is run ball clubs. So let me see what can happen there. And I wanted to own a club, so, I didn't have to work for owners who didn't know what they were talking about. So I started looking. Well, yeah. Well, they were paying me $600 a month, so nobody ever went broke with me working for them. So I thought, okay, let me own my own club, and I started looking at different, leagues that needed something, and the Carolina League had been down to 4 clubs, was barely hanging on. They got 6, and the Braves wanted to put a club in that league, but they didn't want to own it. It was the first club they didn't want to own, but they wanted somebody that knew how their systems work, and here I was, still available. So I got the Durham Bulls franchise, was issued in the fall of 1979.
Well, and did you know at that time that, well, I probably didn't, right? But I mean, that's one half of the sort of, I guess, catalyst that kind of just literally vaulted you, kicking and screaming into this sport and into the world of minor league baseball, probably for good. What was your first year or two of the Durham Bulls experience? Because it seems like, I mean, obviously people know the movie, right, by now, right?
Right.
And the romance around that stuff. I'm thinking, though, those first days when you finally got the money together and probably some investors behind you, that you must have had a few moments of afterthought that perhaps this may have been the craziest thing you've ever done, and or not, and you just knew what you were doing and you just needed to go forward.
No, I mean, I went out and raised about $30,000 in capital. The franchise cost $2,500, but I needed money to get through the winter. So I went to family and friends and, hey, can you put a little money in it? And got around $30,000 capitalization. Fortunately, one of the people I knew a Hollywood producer named Tom Mount, who was from Durham. And Tom said, I'll put $5,000 in your club, because he'd grown up in the town. And he came to town in the winter before we opened. He said, someday Miles will make a movie here. And I'm thinking, who is this guy? I've never met him, and he's telling me he's going to make a movie. And I think, sure, glad to have it. Left it at that. But by February, March, my money ran out, and I went to my GM and I said, I got good news and bad news for you. The good news, I'm raising your salary from $700 a month to $900 a month. The bad news is I don't have the money to pay you, but if we ever get it, I'll pay you. And he accepted those conditions. And I'd wake up at 4 a.m. thinking of all the things we had to do, and we didn't have this, and the health department came in and said we needed an ice machine, and they cost $2,000, and I didn't have $2,000, and just the world was crashing in, and I didn't know what to do. But the league quietly loaned me a couple grand to get me to opening day, and everything clicked. And you never know. I mean, I've been in enough towns. You never know until you opening day if people are going to show up. And Durham had never been a good baseball town prior to that, or had a couple good years. But on opening day, we drew 4,000. It was a Tuesday. The next 2 nights, we drew about 800, but I wasn't disappointed at all with 800 fans. Then Friday night, we drew nearly 3,000. And then Saturday night, we had a jacket night. And these cheap vinyl jackets that if you pull hard enough on the sleeve, it comes off. But it was jacket night. And, I think we ordered a couple thousand, and, for kids. And you still there?
Oh yeah, I'm amazed. I'm amazed you're able to do it this far.
Yeah. And by game was at 7:30. By 7 o'clock, all the jackets were gone. People were lined up a couple city blocks long to get in. And Pete Bach, my GM, and I were out there telling people we're out of jackets, we're running out of seats, come back another day. Nobody left. Everybody still wanted to come because we had banks in the outfield where people could just sit. And I think we had about 6,000 that night. And, everything just exploded after that.
Well, I want to come back to the Mount investment and the circle of that story in a moment. But why do you think it clicked? Was it did you have? I mean, obviously you had some luck in getting the ice machine thing figured out and all that but what was it? Was it promotional moxie? Was it you had a good approach to getting the word out and PR and messaging? Was it just the town was just desperate for something to do and this filled the gap? What was it, do you think, that led to this early and maybe surprising success?
A little bit of all of that. One, Durham was the third city in the triangle. You've got Raleigh, the state capital, Chapel Hill with the university there, and Durham was sort of the blue-collar, cigarette factories, textiles, and those were all dying. So Durham was really struggling. There's sort of like a Rust Belt city, but there was energy in the city. So it was a town ready for something. They wanted to cheer Durham. I mean, that's what you want when you have a ball club. You can put the name of the city on your uniforms, that doesn't mean the city will accept it. And Durham was just so ready. And we also, I'm a newspaper guy, and I love newspapers. And we had two good competing newspapers. That's when everybody had a morning and evening. And we had a great young sports writer, Ron Morris, who went to spring training, who, wrote stories about us, like we were a big deal. We're on the equal with Duke basketball, which wasn't before Krzyzewski got there, and Duke football. We were part of that mix. It was just, and the Braves sent us Dirty Al Gallagher as our manager, so we didn't have one of these colorless minor league managers who comes in and says, I'm here to develop players, not win games. And he brought energy. That here's this guy named Dirty Al. What's that about? And it was just, Durham was a city that was ready, and all the elements came together. And it doesn't happen often. I mean, I'm a good operator, but I can go to a city and not do well just as well as anybody else. But if the elements are there, I think I can build on them. I mean, in Durham, I didn't know everything was going to be this good. But after that first week, and we're asking people not to come in because they can't find seats, I'd never done that before. And, we better handle this thing right.
So beyond that, though, tell us what happened the next year, because this is sort of the second part, I guess, of the catalytic movement again, and it actually has some synergies when you look back on it, I'm sure. But this people now know as Baseball America, right? But before that, it was known as something else, and it was, I don't know, was it a startup? Was it fledgling? Had it been around for a while? Tell us about the story about how you found out about it and, frankly, what you did about it and why it's important to this story.
Well, the first year was great. And, your ego builds from there. And we're thinking, well, we're pretty good. We should do other things. And a friend of mine on the West Coast, a guy named Bob Freitas, called and said, there's this little baseball newspaper that's for sale. You should buy it because he's going to go out of business. And, I had seen the paper. It had come a free copy, and there was something there. And the editor was a young man named Alan Simpson, who had started it in his garage, had a circuit. He had maybe 3,000 or 4,000 subscribers. And he wasn't going to be able to continue, but he had something, and he was producing it in Canada, and was largely big league college. He was a big college fan, but college baseball. But he'd also run a team in Lethbridge, Alberta. I hope that's the right province. But so we had Alan Simpson come to Durham, and would he sell it? Basically, he'd sell it for debts. He needed to pay his father back the money he'd learned, and he said, I'll come to Durham and we can produce it here, but I have to have a visa. Well, I knew nothing about visas, and my lawyer, who's Tom Bount's father, the movie producer, his father, who was really good, said, look, I'm not an immigration specialist either. You should go to Charlotte, where the immigration office is, and find out exactly what you need to do. So I drove down to Charlotte and sit and fill out forms so you can meet with people. And then I handed the form in and just kept sitting. And maybe 45 minutes later, the lady comes out and hands me a piece of paper that it's a visa for Alan Simpson. And I wasn't coming down to get one, but they gave it to me, and I'm smart enough to know I better not ask any questions. Let me just get out of here because I got this visa. So we got the visa for Alan. And he hadn't told his wife, who was 9 months pregnant, that they were moving to North Carolina with 2 kids. But it all worked out. It was he called it the All America Baseball News, and we brought it to Durham, retitled it Baseball America. And one reason we wanted it was the sporting news. I'd grown up with the sporting news as the baseball Bible, and loved it to death. But it wasn't covering the minors anymore. And we said, well, we'll go head to head with the sporting news, and we did. And over the next 3 or 4 years, it grew and got to be tremendously respected in the baseball world.
So it was Baseball America essentially became, through your efforts and Alan's efforts, the Bible, if you will, of minor league baseball, right? Because the big entity, at least because Sporting News, certainly not Sports Illustrated, no major national publication was giving any real in-depth coverage of the base of the pyramid that was supporting the major leagues.
Correct. Yeah. Alan almost single-handedly made the United States aware of the draft. The baseball draft had been going on for 15 years, and nobody knew it or understand it. And he started publicizing that. We knew we had it made when, after the first year, we had Peter Gammons as one of our correspondents and Terry Pluto. And
two amazing names in sports writing.
Yeah,
history.
2 great writers who, were doing a weekly column for us, but they were also doing it for the Sporting News. And the Sporting News says, hey, you got to, make up your mind. You can't write for both publications. And both of them quit the Sporting News and stayed with us. And we were paying $50 a week or something. It wasn't for the money. They wanted to be with a pure baseball publication. And that's what we were. We were, writing about what was going on. And we had, major league columns and some great columnists, Dick Young and Tracy Ringlesby. But there was no other place for these people to get their name nationally. They were big in their home cities, but they wanted to be with Baseball America. And we, over the years, hired so many good writers that went on to major publications.
And all the while, though, you're also, and I'm guessing the synergies sort of kind of presented themselves, right? I'm guessing you probably didn't have any foresight to say, oh, well, this publication and my new baseball team in Durham are going to have some synergistic things that come out of it. But at the very least, I'm guessing all this editorial stuff kind of gave you some knowledge, some heads up about what was going on around the country, and perhaps maybe some other franchises or teams or opportunities, which is, I think, was kind of what you did by adding a few more to your, I guess, call it a roster of teams.
Yeah, there were teams that were struggling, and again, the price of minor league franchises hadn't exploded. So over the next few years, we picked up Asheville, Butte, Montana, and Utica, New York. Certainly not great franchises, but we, sort of straighten them up, get them operating rationally, and sell them in a year or two. We got an Appalachian League club in Burlington, North Carolina, which we ended up keeping for 30 years. But it was just, we're in baseball, and we got a chance to buy this team. Well, let's do it. Again, I had a good number 2 guy named Dave Chase, and I'd say, okay, Dave, you're in charge of Utica. Find somebody that wants to go to Utica, New York, and run a team, and we'd do that. And, it was just, minor league baseball was coming back really big, in the 80s. The 70s, it was at Pitts, the native minor leagues, they were failing. Tal Smith was suggesting or promoting the do away with the minor leagues team system. Let's put all the teams in Florida, maybe keep AAA. But, he was pushing hard that the facilities were so bad and the operations were so bad. Why are we funding this operation? But in the early 80s, Larry Schmidt, who started Nashville, and then he did Greensboro, and then, Columbus, Ohio. I was doing play-by-play in Richmond in '77, and they built a new ballpark, and they were drawing crowds that nobody had ever seen like that. They were drawing 500,000 a year. And Columbus, again, here opened my eyes. Look, you can do it. So there were just so many good things happening in minor league baseball in the 80s that, and we were riding this wave with everybody else, with the newspaper and with the teams. And let's see where it'll go.
No conflicts of interest per se, right? I mean, by having multiple teams under, or lather, rinsing, and repeating the same formula and getting in and out of franchises and stuff, right? It's all the while you're still holding on to the Bulls, right? And nobody.
Yeah, well, the Bulls are. Bulls are making all this possible. I had never had any backing, and so all of a sudden the Bulls now own. It wasn't Miles Wolff owning these teams; it was the Durham Bulls that owned Butte. The Durham Bulls owned Baseball America. It was, the Bulls were just, an amazing, backstop for all these operations, and gave us good people. And we would send them, do you want to go to Pulaski, Virginia? Well, I don't know. We'll go, So it was just a great time.
That's interesting. So it's almost sort of almost a model, I guess, of sort of what today we know sort of as private equity backed, sports enterprises that have multiple team, pieces of ownership or outright ownership and that kind of stuff. I mean, you're ahead of your time, maybe perhaps unwittingly, just knowing that, hey, I've got a good business enterprise going with the Bulls, but hey, I've got some expertise and now content and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that could be applied to other places in minor league baseball simultaneously as well, if not for the long haul like the Bulls, but at least, sharing and benefiting and maybe profiting along the way with this intelligence, this knowledge, this experience.
Sure. But we believed in baseball. We just believed if you do it right, people will come. And, all the things you'll hear at any seminar, clean bathrooms, good restrooms, good food, all of that. But we believed the game was good. Come out and see this, and that's why we just had confidence. Okay, we can go into Pulaski, Virginia, and we're not going to make a lot of money, but we can make a little, we can, save the town, let's do it. So, it wasn't, you don't buy some of these franchises to make a lot of money, but it's available. And, sometimes leagues would come to us, can you buy, help us here? Sure. It was just what we were doing.
All right, let's come back to that push pin that I put in the bulletin board, the virtual bulletin board a few minutes ago, about Tom Mount, because not only was he an investor in the Bulls, and I guess having been a local resident and sort of having a special sort of place in his heart for the town, the city of Durham, and the Bulls franchise in particular, and your efforts to, rehabilitate it or take it to the levels that you were taking it to. Tell us the backstory of what ultimately became the iconic movie that I think even you didn't expect to be such a dramatic success.
Oh, no. As I say, Tom in 1980 had said, we'll make a movie here someday, but he's out producing a lot of good movies for Universal, doing good things. And I just read the Ron Shelton book on the screenwriter, on how he came to write the screenplay and how it was, how it all happened. But on our end, Tom just called one day and said, "Hey, I've got this screenwriter who's got an idea for a script. I'd like him to come to Durham and just get a feel for what's going on." And Ron Shelton had been a minor league player, had gotten as high as AAA in the Orioles organization, but sort of left baseball when I think he was behind Bobby Grich and was never going to get to the big leagues. And so he had been out writing movie scripts and all this. So he came to Durham to get back in that minor league feel. And he must have been here a couple weeks, and he would sit on the bench and, talk to the players. And Tom had never said this movie has to be made in Durham. He was just looking for a good script. Didn't even, contemplate where it would be made. But Ron Shelton fell in love with the old ballpark in Durham, the grittiness of it, the grittiness of the town, this old tobacco town. And he knew the movie should be made there. So, maybe 6 months later says, "Tom, calls, we're going to make the movie in Durham." Great. I never knew anything about making movies, but, and we helped out. We got uniforms. They used our uniforms, the visiting team we got from other Carolina League cities, helped them, because the movie was done by Orion, and they didn't believe it, didn't have a lot of faith in it. They were getting out with the eight men out, or what's the Chicago White Sox, Black Sox movie was coming out that same year. And they believed that was going to be their hit. And Bull Durham was on their, not on their high list. So we were doing what we could to help. And the movie was filmed in the fall of either 86 or 87. And we'd never heard of Kevin Costner, who, Susan Sarandon was just this movie name we knew, and all of this. But, we were doing all the things, to make the baseball real. Ron Shelton certainly knew baseball, and on his end, there are not any of these phony scenes. They're real baseball scenes. But from my perspective, I didn't think they knew what they were doing. Not that I had any knowledge, but, they wanted to get a big crowd for a game. So we wrote to all our season ticket holders, and we're going to give out free hot dogs and come at 2:00 for the filming. So we got maybe a couple thousand there, and they decided, let's make it a night scene. Well, I'd invited all these people for 2:00, and they said, don't give out the hot dogs now till at night. No. And so, things like that. My GM, Pete Bach, was the baseball consultant. I mean, we had hired Pete that spring. He was with the first GM in Durham. Then he went to Hawaii to be the GM of the Hawaii Islanders, came back to Durham, and we were putting Pete in charge of all the other operations we were doing. And we put him, okay, you're the baseball guy to help them, get the bus, all of that. But for one scene where Millie gets married, the marriage scene, they hadn't hired an actor. They had a costume, and the only person who fit the costume was Pete Bach. And so he became the minister, had to join the, Screen Guild very quickly so he could, pronounce the man and wife. So, as I say, it was sort of a disjointed production, and I sort of, let me stay away from this because I'll get frustrated. And then the next spring, they had the premiere in Durham, and, we wore tuxedos and all of this, and I was just nervous. This is going to be embarrassing. And it wasn't. I was, but that first showing, okay, I think this is okay. So maybe a week later, my wife and I went to a little neighborhood theater where it was showing, and I was relaxed and I just laughed and wow, this is good. But Ron Shelton had a good script. He knew baseball. He got actors, Kevin Costner since then has had a great career, Susan Sarandon, Tim Robbins. My early thoughts were this wasn't going to be much of anything.
Well, but it was I guess a real sort of not only shot in the arm, but sort of a lightning bolt of. But in the backdrop though, you were already trying to move this franchise along further, right? You had designs of what league were you playing in? AA at that point? Single A?
No, Class A Carolina League.
Class A Carolina. Sorry. So you had already had designs of trying to upgrade the team to higher levels like AAA around that time too, right? I mean, you were
not really. We were trying to get a new stadium.
Okay, sure.
The ballpark had been built in 1939, and it was totally inadequate for the crowds we were getting. People lined up to go to the restroom. We kept building new concession stands. We still couldn't serve everybody. You'd go underneath the grandstand and could pull rebars out of the concrete and break them with your bare hands because they'd rusted. The ballpark, we needed a new facility.
And by the way, this was already starting before the movie even hit.
Yeah. But the movie just pushed us over the top. Where we were struggling handling the crowds after the movie, there was no way to take care of the crowds. It just, people wanted to come and, we set up an 800 number to sell our souvenirs so people could call in and get a hat or whatever, because there was no internet to order anything on. So we opened a store in the mall to sell our goods. So everything was booming, but we've got this old, Depression era ballpark that needs to, can't handle it. And the city was getting so much good publicity from the ball club, and everything was going on. And Raleigh wanted a team then. They didn't want it earlier. And we were fighting to keep the Bulls the only team in the triangle. We were sticking up for Durham the whole time. But guys, it's time for a new ballpark. And it didn't happen. And that's what drove me to sell the team.
And into the hands of Capital Broadcasting and the Goodman family and all that. But that's still that's a hell of a ride from where your Durham experience began. I mean, now you're coming out of that, and you're looking for other things to do, though, right? Other teams, other things in baseball. You even got into ice hockey after that. You want to explain a little bit of that detour?
Sure. Again, I had mentioned Pete Bockett. He was there to bring in new projects, and the East Coast Hockey League was then starting to grow. And a friend of ours, Blake Cullen, who had been with the Chicago Cubs, was running the team there. And he said, guys, this is just like running a baseball team. You don't need to know anything about hockey. You just need to know how to market and take care of fans and all of that. And so Pete and I said, well, why not? And there was an old arena in Raleigh called Dorton Arena that was built really well. They had a cow washing pit out in front, so for an agricultural fair and all of that sort of thing. It wasn't built for ice hockey, but we were able to fit one in there. And again, it clicked. Again, Raleigh was ready, and then the hockey and there were many transplanted Northerners in the Triangle by the early 1990s, and we, the hockey team did just amazingly well for 3 or 4 years.
But but hockey's not baseball, or did it not matter to you?
It didn't matter. I really enjoyed it. I didn't know anything about it, so I was always amazed people could skate and hit each other and still stand up. It was like running a ball club. I mean, the same principles, and we put Pete, who'd been GM of the Bulls, put Pete as the GM of the Raleigh Ice Caps. And first year we had an awful team because we didn't know how to get players, but it didn't matter. And I mean, what happened is we got so successful is that at first the American Hockey League decided they wanted to come in, and hockey has no territories. Baseball has territories that protects you. That if you have a ball club in Durham, nobody else can put a ball club in Durham for now a 35-mile radius. And hockey had none of that. And they were building a new arena for the basketball team in Raleigh. And originally the architects and the athletic director met with us. We met with architects, and we were going to go into this new 15,000-seat arena. And it was great. And then they stopped talking to us because the American Hockey League came down and said, "You want us?" And then the NHL came in and said, "Whoa, if this is coming in, this great new arena is coming, we want to be in it." So, I knew I can't fight this group, so I sold it to a political guy who thought he could work the politics but couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, once again, you're kind of ahead of the curve, right? I mean, the Raleigh Ice Caps, obviously, the Carolina Hurricanes now have been there for years, much to the chagrin of Hartford Whaler fans, but I digress. But you kind of sowed the seeds, if you will, for hockey in a market which I would argue historically wasn't sort of a very major pro ice hockey hotbed, really, then.
No. I mean, as with many of our ventures, people didn't think they would go. We had to take a puck to the sports editor because he'd never seen a hockey puck. He didn't know what they were doing, and he assigned the golf writer to cover the team because we were quietly told he wanted the golf writer to quit. He didn't think he'd stay covering hockey, and he ended up loving it. There were not a lot of people who were saying, "Wow, this is a great idea," but the fans wanted it. It'll just be at the right place at the right time. You never know. But we thought, well, let's give hockey a try. And for 4 years, it was a great run.
All right, all the while, though, you're still interested in baseball. And I want to go back to this other team that actually you wound up holding on for quite some time, but we kind of overlooked, was Burlington. You want to tell us the story of that and why that sort of, I don't know, was in your portfolio perhaps for the longest period of time?
Any place there was an old ballpark. I love old ballparks. We wanted to see, can you put a team there? And Burlington is just 30 miles from Durham. I'm sorry, Burlington's in Virginia or is it North Carolina? North Carolina.
Okay. But close to the border?
Yeah, it's midway between Greensboro and Durham. And when I was growing up in Greensboro, occasionally we'd go over to Burlington when they were playing the Greensboro Patriots or the Greensboro Yankees. So I knew the town, and it was an old textile town. But here they had this old ballpark, and well, let's try to put a team there. I mean, why not? And I think we started looking about 1982, met with the Well, I went to Jack McKeon, who lived in Burlington, and Jack, what if we put a team here? Who do I talk to? And he gave me the name of the mayor pro tem, and the guy was enthusiastic. And, well, let me find a league. Well, the problem was, again, territorial. Greensboro didn't want a team that close, 25 miles. And they were in the South Atlantic League, and they were able to block it. And it was maybe, we were talking to the Appalachian League, but we weren't what was called in their footprint. They were mostly in mountain towns. And the Cleveland Indians had, Dan O'Brien, the GM there, was interested, but he was going to put a club in, and I won't name the city, but they were ready to go there until he went there to get things set. And the mayor told him, "Oh, we'd love to have you here, but we can't house any black ball players." So that was a pretty negative thing for the Indians. And that's, Dan then came to us quickly, "Can you give us a backup?" Because this was late in the winter. And then I went to the mayor pro tem, and can we get a ballpark built in 3 months? Or the old one refurbished, because it was rotting and it was dangerous. And we got it in the Appalachian League, and again, it did well. Because again, Burlington was ready. Burlington had baseball in the Carolina League through 1970, and it died, and now people were ready for baseball again. And the town, I don't want to say exploded, but just did very, very well for us in a little rookie league that had never really drawn well. And, they didn't promote, and we were there promoting and doing all these things. And I think helped the league say, "Oh, well, if they can do that in Burlington, we can do it here in Pulaski or Bristol or wherever." So Burlington, was, as I say, it was just a rookie league, played a half season, but it was just a nice little addition to our stable of clubs.
I'm just fascinated by this because one looks at your resume and just the teams just keep on coming, right? I mean, you had a team in Bangor, Maine that you were thinking about moving to Quebec City in Canada. You were involved with the Northeast League in New York State. I mean, just on and on and on. But I guess we could go on forever. I guess I just want to sort of do a cul-de-sac around maybe sort of, and I guess I could overgeneralize here, is sort of this, I guess, sort of move or evolution, if you will, into independent league forms of minor league baseball. Now, to the general sports fan or even passing baseball fan, I'm not sure there's a real full understanding of what, at least until very recently, and we'll get to that at the end. That'll be our last wind-up question. I think you'll know what that'll be. Most of the minor league teams that we've talked about and the system is known for are related to or overseen by or even owned by, until fairly recently, the major league teams above them, right? But there's this independent dynamic that it almost seems like you gravitated to. Can you explain the difference? And do I have that right, that independent league baseball became more of a fancy for you in later years?
Yeah, no, it did. I mean, it would be my first love now, if you would. But, and not to get too technical or historical, but all baseball was independent until the late 1920s, early 1930s, when Branch Rickey formed the first farm system. Major league teams originally just would buy a good player at AAA, and the AAA teams would buy good players from AA and all of that. So the concept of teams without major league help was the way baseball used to be. But by the early 1950s, nobody could survive without the major league help, because the major leagues were then paying almost all the salaries in spring training and all of that, and they had the ability to get players. So by 1960, there were no independent teams left. Occasionally, a team would not be able to get a working agreement, and it would have to operate 1 year as an independent until it could get a working agreement. But these were, didn't happen often, and it wasn't good when you didn't have a working agreement because you tended to go out of business. But sort of my guru, a guy named Bob Freitas, who I mentioned earlier, was a product of the old school where you didn't need major league help. He'd started in the 40s, and he believed that the concept of independent baseball without major league help, and he had been president of the Northwest League. And in 1973, he had convinced a movie actor, Bing Russell, to put a team in Portland, Oregon, which had lost their AAA club, and he went in the rookie Northwest League.
Well, I know where this is going. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's going, well, it goes to the movie The Battered Bastards of Baseball. Bing Russell, again, clicked. Here, Portland had AAA, and they hadn't supported it, and there are lots of reasons for that. But they come in with this brash guy out of Hollywood who signs guys like Jim Bouton and Louis Tiant or whatever. And Frank the Flake Peters was his manager. And wow. And I'm looking at this from the East Coast and thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to be in baseball. When I'm running an affiliated club, I'm not really doing anything in baseball. I'm selling peanuts and popcorn and, being a facility manager. But I saw what Bing Russell had done and actually went to I was trying to put a ball club in Victoria, BC, which we don't need to go there. But I drove out to the West Coast, and he just takes me in to see Bing Russell. And he's one of these larger than life guys. It's just, you're captivated. So that's when I figured that's what I like. That's what would be more fun than an affiliated team. Because one of Freitas's theories was, people want to see a team win. And you have in a minor league affiliated team, the big league club doesn't care if you win or lose. They want to develop their shortstop who got $150,000 to sign. So, it was, you were at the mercy of the big league club when you're running a minor league team. So, Bing Russell does this, and it's amazing, but I'm still without club, et cetera then. But then later on, one of my investors in the Bulls, Van Schley, puts an independent team in Salt Lake City, Utah, because they weren't able to get a working agreement. And again, it explodes. The same principle. Let's try to win. They won 26 straight games in the rookie league, Pioneer League. It was unfair because they were signing AA, AAA vets to play against rookies, but the fans at Salt Lake City didn't care. They wanted to see their team win. So this thread is running through baseball of independent.
But I'm sorry, but most of those teams, though, right, are they come and go, right? The Mavericks maybe was probably the most successful, maybe during that period of 4 or 5 years, then, right?
Yeah.
So that inspiration's got to be a little worrisome because they're not necessarily guaranteed to be successful, even though they're exploding, as you're mentioning, these teams when they show up.
Yeah, but just one city. That's where, and we'll get to it, and these are major markets. Portland's a AAA market. Salt Lake City is. So they've got the population base to do it. And again, they get successful enough, then a big league club wants to get in there and, put their players in this because there are lots of fans and they like, being having fans and all of that. So these, the Mavericks and the Salt Lake City don't last long as independents, but they show what can be done. And after I sold the Bulls, when we lost the referendum for a new ballpark, I sold the Bulls, and that gave me a big cushion financially because I sold it for a lot more than the $2,500 that I bought it for, and I could start doing some things. And that was '91, and I still had Baseball America, and I was publisher, but when they got strange phone calls, they direct them to me, minor league questions. And within a month, I got a phone call from somebody in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. How do we get baseball? And then one from Duluth, Minnesota. We'd like baseball up here. And then Thunder Bay, Ontario. And I don't know where the hell Thunder Bay is, so I'm taking out my map while I'm talking to this guy and see, well, it's close to Duluth. Maybe there's something out there. And the idea for an independent league starts to grow. Can this be done? So I travel out there. I find a ballpark in St. Paul, Minnesota, with 7 miles from the Metrodome, and you can't fight the big leagues. Well, let's try it, and I, go to Winnipeg, but they're not ready. But Rochester, Minnesota has a nice little ballpark. And then I start calling some of the good operators in baseball. Hey, you want to try an independent league in Minnesota, the old Northern League? And I get people that had to operate independent clubs. And they're all excited. You got a Mike Veck who's, been running a club in Florida. Marv Goldklang, who's a part owner of the Yankees. Harry Stavronos, who'd been running the Bad News Bees in San Jose. There were these crew of people, and I had 6 cities. And we start, well, what city do you want? What city do you want? And, Marv Goldklang, he and Mike Veck owned some really successful teams, had a bad flight to Erie, Pennsylvania. And he said, look, I'll put a team, but I don't want to have to change planes. Well, the only direct flight from Marv's home in New Jersey is to Minneapolis, St. Paul. So, Marv, you want St. Paul? Sure. I didn't think I'd find anybody willing to do St. Paul so close to the Metrodome. And we got 6 owners. And again, the timing was right. We had good operators, 6 good owners. We had cities that hadn't had baseball for 20 years. And, the Minnesota Twins were convinced we were going to fail by July. Andy McPhail said it's just beer league baseball, And we were getting players like Leon Bull Durham and former ex-big leaguers wanting to play in our league because there was nowhere to play. You could go to Mexico or maybe Japan, but here, there was a pitcher named Jeff Bittiger who had pitched 3 or 4 years in the Twins, who I knew from the Carolina League, called up and wanted to play in the league. This is before we started. So all of a sudden, gosh, we're getting really good players here. And so, again, everything fell into place. I mean, it was a phenomenal first year. Pedro Guerrero, for the National League Batting Championship, was at Sioux Falls. Oil Can Boyd went to Sioux City because they wanted to play baseball. And that was, we were paying, I think Leon Bull Durham made $1,400 a month, an ex-big leaguer. But the towns, the cities, the area. The old Northern League was an area that had been once great for baseball, and it was ready again.
And you kept doing it. You did the Northeast League later on, and then kind of combined them, and then cross played them, and then those led it to other ones like the American Association of Professional Baseball and the Can-Am League, I guess, absorbed some of the Northeast League stuff. And so independent baseball, I mean, it's ironic that you would create leagues for independent teams.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of switched from running teams to running leagues. It just, I've got to, we've got to put good people here. You got to put good people there. We saw the Northeast League was ready to fail. It was in places like Yonkers and cities you don't want to be in. And, that's what got me to Quebec City, probably the town I've loved the most of all my baseball ventures was Quebec. Pure French speaking. And the only way I could operate there was my wife, Michelle, grew up in northern Maine in a French-speaking town. The town's name is Frenchville, so that probably follows. And so we moved the whole family up to Quebec City for a year, put the kids in school up there, and set up a team that just 2 nights ago I was watching them win the championship in the Frontier League, and the place was packed. And it's the things we had started 22 years ago. They're still doing the same mascot, this tradition. You build up traditions. And I so love Quebec City, and I love the town and the baseball. And as I say, of all the, I've had some great towns, but that's been my favorite. And the French fans are just so enthusiastic, and joie de vivre. I mean, it's a tremendous place to watch a baseball game.
All right, let me ask you a couple of sort of wrap up or round up questions. Okay, so number one, this is great. Our audience is going to eat this up, so don't you worry. So let me sort of ask questions. So how did Major League Baseball and the minor league baseball establishment look at you and that of independent league baseball during this time, the 90s and 2000s and stuff? Were they encouraging, discouraging, worse than that?
Major League Baseball wasn't encouraging, but here was a free source of talent. Okay, you've got their farm clubs, but here are players. Most of the players we're signing had been signed by affiliated teams earlier. And it's sort of a second chance league, and pitchers, learning to control their breaking pitch. And so early on, they always recognized our contracts. So that gave us, some validity there, that they would, if they wanted a player, they would pay. At that point, they paid $3,000 for a player, to go to AA or AAA. They needed fill-ins. It wasn't like we did have players go directly to the big leagues, but by and large, okay, we need a AA shortstop. Let's go to the independent leagues rather than have to go to Venezuela. So the big leagues, other than the Twins, okay, we'll let them go where they're playing baseball. The affiliated minor leagues hated us because they had a monopoly, and the prices of their teams were just skyrocketing. And here we're coming in and saying, you don't need to, pay millions of dollars and have more fun with an independent club. So the affiliated minors fought us at every direction. One of the things they did that did hurt us was you couldn't own teams in affiliated and independent. They wouldn't let you do that. So we were cut out of getting some good ownerships, because good ownerships is the key. But
it's kind of a blackballing, if you will. People maybe
blackballing, yeah. But Marv Goldklein and Mike Veck, who had been in before this rule was instituted, were grandfathered. Okay, we can't, backdoor and say you can't own it now. But other than that, so that for me was what hurt the most, as I couldn't always get the good ownership that I needed.
But yet, but it also allowed you to be a little bit more sort of promotionally unchained, if you will, right? Unbounded and the more fun league. Yeah.
No, I mean, that was it. Independent baseball is fun. And, Mike Veck had the pig that took the baseballs to the umpires. And, they were, he'd signed Minnie Minoso for one at bat so he could play in 5 decades. So, no, I mean, there were some stupid independent teams that did, traded a player for a Muddy Waters album or something, but you could do these things that, and I think by and large, independent baseball respected the game. Occasionally, they didn't make a mockery of it because some people like to, but so particularly in the Northern League, Mike would do all these crazy promotions, but it wouldn't take away from the game. He understood the game. It's got to go on, with the way it always has. But he'd do a lot of crazy stuff around the game.
All right, so here's a question then that kind of sort of brings it into relief, and I kind of maybe signaled it a little bit earlier, but we all know what's happened over the last 2 years with Major League Baseball, shall we say, formalizing or backwardly integrating the minor league baseball system, getting rid of, some of the quote unquote dead wood as part of that. And I guess more authoritatively harmonizing the minor leagues, even to the point of even futzing with some of the legendary league names for whatever reasons. I think I kind of have a general idea of how you're gonna answer this question. But what do you think of this evolution, if you will, or this change to the structure and the relationship between major and minor league baseball, and I don't know, making it almost like a subsidiary company, if you will, of the big boys?
Yeah. Well, to begin with, the big leagues cut 42 minor league teams. Well, in my mind, that's a crime. I mean, you're supposed to be the protector of baseball, and you're taking baseball away from 40 cities that have, had it for years. Is that the way to make it the national pastime? And yeah, you make the Appy League a rookie league and, subsidize it a bit, but that's not pro baseball. The independent leagues became what they call partner leagues, and they got nothing for it, but now they're under control of the commissioner's office. And the commissioner's office is a bunch of lawyers who don't love the game. They're there because it's good money and they get the big deal it. But, so I think Major League Baseball, the people running it are not good for baseball, and that you take baseball from 40 cities is a crime.
Do you think independent baseball can take over those places and fill in those gaps, or is that essentially being quashed as part of this process, either
it's not
literally
being
or not?
Quashed. They've made the Pioneer League an independent league, and again, they're subsidizing it to their credit. But independent
that's
baseball,
as an affiliate, right? And as an affiliated league, right? Not a part of the system, right?
Yeah, as a partner league, because they were getting so much political chaff from from doing this. But independent ball is so expensive to run because you've got to pay the players, you've got to pay the spring training, you got to pay the workman's comp, and that's what when we started it, we didn't realize how expensive it was to run an independent league and clubs. So, you just worry about the long-term viability. If you're not tied to MLB, you've got more freedom, but now you can be outrageous. You can do interesting things with the game. So, I've got to be just cautiously optimistic about the independent game because of the financial realities. That now, the lawyers are suing the players should get, money based on the time they're on the bus and all of this. And well, you're just killing baseball. I mean, that's not going to help players. It's going to kick more, there'll be less and less players signed, and you'll only have 10 rounds of the draft. And those kids, the Mike Diaz's, who was a 55th round draft pick, becomes a Hall of Famer, and the Brett Butlers and all these guys that made it on desire, not on this pure tools. So, to cut the draft, to not give kids a chance, and they're not looking for the money, Yeah, can they survive on $800 a month? Barely, but they don't care. Just give me one chance. Give me a couple months, and I'll prove to you, I am a good baseball player. So we're losing all of that.
No doubt. And but here locally in Chicago, I'd go out occasionally and watch the Butch Hobson managed Chicago Dogs out at Impact Field.
Oh, yeah.
Still hanging it out there, and it's in a major city, right? It's obviously Rosemont, which is
that's
suburb,
it.
right?
I mean,
But
the St. Paul's, the Chicago's, the Long Island Ducks, the big leagues took three of the great independent franchises: St. Paul, the Houston market when Sugarland and Northern New Jersey Club, all to the affiliated baseball because they were doing so well. So they took, in this latest thing, the best independent clubs, which is going to hurt because St. Paul is the magnet city for the upper Midwest, and you hate that, but the ownership, if somebody's going to give them a AAA club, I mean, financially, you got to do it. But you see the Chicago Dogs, which are great new stadium. The great new stadiums have been such a, you look at the American Association, Winnipeg, a great stadium, Fargo, a great stadium, Chicago, a great stadium. I love the ballpark in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Kansas City. These are great ballparks, and they're in major markets too.
It's also part of the sort of real estate dynamic of pro sports these days too, right? So having a smaller minor league stadium, buttressed by or surrounded by other sort of attractions and whatnot, make it sort of year round, if you will. And I guess like in the Chicagos, and the Kansas Cities of the world, right? It's also it's a great differentiator from the big league team down the street, right? Because what that dynamic is, the prices of those, the kind of commitment that's needed to go to a game, or season tickets are half of that. But you don't need to necessarily give all that thought and get out a spreadsheet to figure out how to go to a Dogs game, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, it was part of the success of the St. Paul Club. One of the things, we were playing in the Dome, and the fan was saying, "I'm waiting for a rain out. I want a rain out just to sit in the rain at a ball game." I mean, it was fun. Going to a big league game is probably not a lot of fun always. I mean, it's a great event, and you're awed by the stadium and all of that, but just to sometimes go to a minor league game and just enjoy the game for what it is.
All right, a couple of quickies, and then I'll let you go, I promise, and you can promote too.
Okay.
Just random question. The The Senior Professional Baseball Association in the late that year and a half thing, did that ever attract your interest at all? The major leaguers of past playing in the winter during in Florida and later in the Southwest, or did that not attract you at all?
No. What I love to say about the independent game is the intensity of the players. This is their last shot. If they don't make it here, they're not going to make it at all. So you go to an independent game, and the intensity for me is a lot more than an affiliated game, because those guys, the kids that got the most money, are trying not to get themselves hurt so they may not dive for that ball, because once they get to the big leagues, they can start diving then. It was just an old timers game in Florida, and I'm not a fan of the Florida markets for baseball. They have all the baseball they need in spring training and the college games. So, I'd rather go to a Fargo or a Thunder Bay or, a city that needs baseball. And the Florida cities didn't need it.
Yeah, that retirement idea makes a lot of sense, despite the names, right, which would probably bring some attraction because people remember their names and the teams they played for and all that kind of stuff. But the nostalgia and the slower pace, and I can see where it's a tough sell, especially when you're trying to look through rose-colored glasses and remember these people in their prime, and they clearly weren't.
Yeah.
How about last random question? Out of all the teams that you owned or were related with, or just, even were in leagues that you competed against, is there any team name that pops into your head as being the most original or bizarre or intriguing, as a team name?
I always liked the Thunder Bay Whiskey Jacks.
Thunder Bay Whiskey Jacks.
And a whiskey jack was a type of jay, a bird, that would, when the area was being settled, would come and steal food out of humans' hands. They said the birds had whiskey courage. So the whiskey jack was the name of a bird indigenous to Thunder Bay area. And I like that one for some reason. I don't like the cutesy names.
Not a big Savannah Bananas fan?
Yeah. Although they've done a great job. And that's half.
If you call it baseball, yeah.
The Winston-Salem Warthogs, I hated. What does that have to do with Winston-Salem? I picked the Bulls because that was the traditional name. I haven't picked, unique, what I call the cutesy names. I'm not a fan of that. It does sell souvenirs, but I want to sell baseball too.
Yeah, you can definitely tell the contrived ones, especially when you smash two words together that have no relation to each other.
Yeah, and you don't capitalize, or you do. I never get, is that capitalized or not? Yeah, sometimes tough to figure out.
All right, well, let's get you into promotional mode. You've got two things coming up as we release this episode a little closer to both of them. Why don't you first start with the memoir, and then tell us about this other thing, which is kind of a labor of love, I guess, at this point, but was actually an outgrowth of Baseball America. It's a compendium, and it's the Bible, if you will. The encyclopedia of all the teams. But first, the memoir. Tell us about the name. And I'm guessing this is just scratching the surface, this conversation of what's in that book.
Yeah. The name of the book is There's a Bulldozer on Home Plate. And when I was running the Northeast League, owner hadn't paid his rent for the stadium, and the mayor went and parked a bulldozer on home plate to keep him from playing. So, it's a little bit of the history of independent baseball. I really wanted to, I started off doing a history of independent, but I'm so involved in it, it became a memoir. But yeah, it's just, and some of the interesting things that have happened. And also at the end, I sort of list all the players who played over 10 years of independent baseball. Just, I'm always amazed, that guys will spend 15 years in the independent leagues and they're not making much money just from the love of the game. So, it's just, when they always ask you where you're going to get players. Well, the players are out there, you have to sort of beat them off with a stick because there's so many guys who want to play professionally, and the good ones keep playing because they, you got to tear the uniform off them type of thing. So the Bulldozer on Home Plate, hopefully it's a good read. I think so. And the other is the Encyclopedia of Minor League Baseball. This is the 4th edition. We published the first 3 editions through Baseball America, which is, again, as you said, just sort of a compendium of every minor league team, of every minor league, the leaders, the standings. It's sort of a reference. It is a reference book if you want to say, gosh, who was managing Salt Lake City in 1955? Well, you go right there, how many people did they draw? So, and it goes through 2019, which I view sort of the end of minor league baseball as we knew it, because for the first 125 years, it was run by the National Association. There was a parent organization, and the big leagues have done away with that. They now control the minors totally. So, and they did away with a lot of the league names. They may have brought them back, but we thought we got to come out with this one final edition because the minors, as we know it, as they've been governed, are done with. And so here's the final edition of the history of minor league baseball. And as I say, it's McFarland Publishing is doing both books, and I'm the co-editor with Lloyd Johnson of the Encyclopedia, and it's, as you say, it has been a labor of love, but I love the history of minor league baseball and all the cities, and the evolution of it. It's it's sort of a fascinating industry to look at.
All right, there you go, friends. Time to get the books and learn all about the fascinating stories of all those teams that we talked about and plenty more. The books you should get. Let's pre-order them, shall we? They come out in the weeks ahead. The first is the Miles Wolff autobiography, I guess you could call it, or certainly a memoir. There's a Bulldozer on Home Plate, a 50-year journey in minor league baseball. That comes out according to Amazon on February 28th of this year. So depending on when you're listening to this episode, it is either available for pre-order now on Amazon.com or is available now if you're listening after that date. And again, if you go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, search up this episode number 288 with Miles Wolff, you'll find a link. So click it, for God's sakes, and give us a couple of shekels of referral love. We appreciate that. And of course, you'll also want to make sure you get the pre-order in place if you're listening to this before March 15th of this year. Afterwards, of course, it's available now. And that is the Encyclopedia of Minor League Baseball, the 4th edition, the complete record of teams, leagues, and seasons from the years spanning 1876 to 2019. The final, the 4th edition. Miles Wolff and Lloyd Johnson co-authoring that tome. And again, available on March 15th, but pre-orderable now on Amazon.com. And again, our episode listing on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, number 288. Just click on that link, and we thank you for giving us a couple of pennies and nickels and maybe a dime or two of referral goodness for doing so as well. While you're on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, you will see, of course, every single stinking episode we've ever done of this show. Lots of links to books and those kinds of things too. If you enjoy those, by all means do so. The best way, of course, to make sure that you get every episode of this stinking little show is to subscribe or follow us wherever you get podcasts. We are available just about everywhere you can do so. So what are you waiting for? If you haven't done that already, by all means do so. You can send us email if you'd like. We're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. You can also follow us on social media, of course. We're on Facebook at Good Seats Still Available. We are on Instagram at Good Seats Still Available. And on Twitter, you will find us at Good Seats Still. Our thanks to Jerry Payne for turning in another fine episode for us this week. We appreciate his tolerance and patience and professionalism, as always. And we thank you, of course, for listening, giving us all the support we've ever wanted and more, and lots of great stuff coming up for you in the weeks ahead. Please stay tuned, check your feeds, and we'll look forward for another fun-filled episode coming up very shortly next week. Thank you for listening. Take care and Happy New Year once again, everybody. Bye-bye.